Amy Dash. She joins us, legal analyst for WFAN, also for CBS Sports. And Amy, thanks for the time this afternoon. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. I always love being on with you guys. Thank you for having me.
No, we appreciate your expertise. Okay, so just big picture, you're a lawyer. You're watching this unfold. It's now up to 16 civil lawsuits that have been filed against Deshaun Watson. Sort of what has been going through your mind as you're watching this?
There's actually one thing going through my mind, and it just keeps circulating through my mind. And it's the question of, why did this guy need so many masseuses? And I think it's like, you want a massage, right? So you try a couple people and one of them is really great. So you stick with them. But to try 10, 15, 20 masseuses. And now what's happening on his side is his lawyer saying, we've been contacted by many masseuses who have given him massages in the past. And they want to come forward in sort of this battle of the masseuses. And they want to say that he's a great guy. And so I'm imagining in my head, if this ever were to go into a civil or a criminal trial, you've got 22, potentially 24 masseuses on one side saying he did all these things, 24 maybe on the other. Why would a person have 48 masseuses? I mean, that's sort of incriminating in my mind, even though you can't convict somebody till they go through the process, but it doesn't look good for him because it shows this pattern of he's seeking out these masseuses. And so one might say, if they were prosecuting the case, that this was just his way of, being a sexual predator and trying to find people in sort of a sexual context that he could potentially exploit.
Amy, what did you take from what Rusty Hardin, who's now representing Deshaun Watson, had to say yesterday?
Rusty Hardin. I think he's going in too many different directions. But at the same time, I sort of sympathize with him because the numbers are so overwhelming. So what he said yesterday is he said a couple things. He said that Deshaun Watson's business manager had been contacted by one of these women and she had allegedly asked for $30,000 to settle the matter, but that she had told the business manager that it was consensual, and that didn't make much sense to him over why would she want money if it was consensual. So that says two things. It says, one, we're going to try to make a case that he's been blackmailed. Two, we're going the consent route, at least with some of these women. Three, he attacked the lawyer, Tony Busby, for the circus-like atmosphere and bringing so many different claims, saying that if one is called into question with this alleged blackmail scheme, then you have to call all of the other ones into question too, that it's part of maybe this larger conspiracy that they're alleging. So Amy, those are his tactics right now, but it's all over the place, right?
Yeah, it's a court of public opinion battle, I think, that's being waged right now, but also it's going to be in civil court. Do you think that this is going to get to the point where criminal charges are going to be filed?
It really depends on the evidence. It's hard to tell. If they gather all of these witnesses and they have the affidavits supposedly from Tony Busby, the police then have to conduct their own investigation. They can't just take everything that he gives them and go to the prosecutor and file charges. They have to vet these people. They have to do their due diligence. They have to see what types of people these are. Are they advertising professional services? Are they advertising massage plus something else? And were there attempts to get money out of him prior to filing the lawsuits, and even if they demanded money for damages done to them, how was it phrased? Was it phrased as, if you don't give me the money, we're going to the authorities and we're going to get you in trouble? That's extortion. Or was it phrased, pay me for the harm that you've done to me so we can settle this matter? So they have to really look at all of the circumstantial evidence, all the direct messages that he had with them on Instagram, and see if they have a strong enough case to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest burden of proof, that he did some of these things.
Amy, is it okay, because you mentioned that Rusty Hardin was critical of Tony Busby. From your perspective, do you think how aggressive Busby has been, social media, all the claims that have now been levied against Deshaun Watson, but specifically the lawyer and the way that he's conducted this and played it out publicly, do you think it's people are within their right to be critical of Busby or no?
I think what Busby's doing, to be honest with you, is not that unusual. You see this all the time with these high-profile cases. Is everybody as out there as Busby? Maybe not, but for the most part, they are tried in the media. That's how it works with somebody who's high-profile, and a lot of times that leads to a settlement. I'm going to say I think it's bizarre that Busby has so many clients and not one other attorney has come out with a client. I do find that very strange. However, that is not to discredit the stories of these women, because they might all be true. Maybe they saw him in the media and they're like, that's the lawyer to go to. Same thing happened to me, and that's where they went. But it is weird. I mean, even with Bill Cosby, with some of these other high profile people, there were complainants who were represented by other attorneys. It wasn't always just one attorney, for this number of people at least.
Yeah, it is. That part of it is definitely interesting. They've been in Houston. There's now someone in Los Angeles who is claiming that Deshaun Watson, was inappropriate with her. Someone in Atlanta who he allegedly flew to Houston. And so it's crossed over multiple states, yet all with the same lawyer. When going back to the allegation about the blackmail and the $30,000 to keep something quiet, when Rusty Hardin, says that calls into question all of the other claims that these other 15 women are bringing against Deshaun Watson, does the fact that the rest of the claims, from what we know, are all for what they're calling the jurisdictional minimum, where it's just $500 that they're claiming right now, these are not huge sums of money, does that influence at all, like, a way a jury might look at this or something like that?
First of all, I don't think that he's right. I don't think it does call into question all the other claims. The fact that one person might have asked for money has nothing to do with all these other women and their experiences. But yeah, it could be a problem for the jury to see that. Yeah, I think that's a good argument. I don't think it has to do with the substance of the case, but I do think, the fact that money was demanded in the beginning, what it does is it discredits the attorney. Because he comes forward in the complaints and says, we only want $500 or whatever it is. Then he stands up there and says, this isn't about money. This is about stopping this type of predatory behavior. Meanwhile, you were reaching out for a 6-figure sum before you even filed the suit. Now we have evidence that another woman potentially was asking for $30,000. So clearly, money has been a factor. At least it was at some point. So that's going to undermine the attorney in a sense.
Amy, civilly, not legally, but civilly, what's the timeline here where you have all these allegations? It's 16 in number now. Who knows? There might be more women that come out against Deshaun Watson. Where's the timeline of what, realistically, how this does play out? Guilt or innocence, but how this plays out moving forward.
The timeline could be months or it could be years. With Antonio Brown, his civil suit is still going on. So if it goes the criminal route, you're definitely talking over a year unless there's some sort of a plea bargain or settlement. On the civil side, same thing. If there's a settlement, it's over tomorrow, right? But if not, and they have to go through the whole court process, especially now with COVID and the pandemic, forget it. Months, definitely.
Amy Dash is our guest, or sifting through this Deshaun Watson saga that's going on in Houston with 16 civil cases filed against him. And, Amy, I know in a lot of these cases, it's very important for the accusers, victims, to have confidentiality. And that's one thing that Rusty Hardin called into question, Deshaun Watson's lawyer, who said, we don't have the identities of these women, so we can't do our due diligence here and trying to call into question, the investigation, not investigation, that they can't come up with their own defense because they can't speak to these women.
Right.
We have dates on a lot of these allegations, not just like there's some that are vague. It's kind of like it was March of 2020. Others have actual dates, like June 6th, 2020. Couldn't they be able to deduce who the woman was if you have the actual date on like half of these filings?
Yeah, clearly the guy's getting so many massages. Maybe he's lost track. But if you have direct messages, if you have dates, then yeah, you would be able to be able to tell. When, listen, that's all a tactical thing. The reason that they're withholding that information, because eventually they're going to have to share that information. What they'll do is they'll try to apply to the court to seal that information and to put a gag order of some sort on the opposing counsel so he can't go out into the media and reveal these people's names. So that's why they're waiting. However, on the other side with Rusty Hardin, the reason why they want that information now is because they're going to hire their own private investigators to go after these women. And they want to try to stop a criminal investigation. So they want to try to hand information over to the police department that they have that's favorable to them to show ulterior motive. And they want to do that before a grand jury convenes. So that's the battle there.
Amy, you mentioned that, when I asked you about Hardin earlier in the interview, that he's kind of all over the place. If you were part of the Hardin legal team now dealing with this with Deshaun Watson, what advice what viewpoint, how would you approach just this onslaught of civil litigation, civil lawsuits that have been brought to the table?
There's no criminal case yet, so I would probably rush to settle everything and make a statement saying, I didn't do anything, but I've chosen to settle this so I can move on with my professional career and not make it more difficult for these women to have to deal with the public onslaught. And I would move on. I would do that before there was any type of a criminal investigation. It gets more complicated, though, now because Tony Busby's allegedly cooperating with the police. And at that point, once you have the police involved, you can't do anything that would seem like you're trying to tamper with witnesses or prevent them from testifying against you. So it's a little bit complicated now.
Should we read into, from what the latest I can tell from what's coming out of Houston, is that the Houston District Attorney at first was saying we have not received anything from Tony Busby, and now that's changed to no comment? Should we read into something like that?
Yeah. So what happened is there was a lot of buzz. Oh, Busby, buzz with Busby, right? That
no pun intended.
he was saying that he reached out to the police department. They were in contact and they weren't. He's such a liar. Even the police department's calling him a liar. But then Busby came out and he showed a text message from a detective. And he said, my apologies. I wasn't in touch formally with the brass of the police department, but I have been speaking to a detective who reached out to me. And so I wouldn't read anything into that. I think he probably is working with the detectives there. And that was just a miscommunication and it just got blown out of proportion.
Amy, how would, I think everyone's looking at this and seeing that. How do you think the NFL will or should react here? If legal charges are not, if criminal charges are not brought against Deshaun Watson, what do you think the reaction here is from the National Football League with everything that we've seen here with this case?
Oh, gosh, there's too many women. There's just too many women. They have to put him on the exempt list. Just from a publicity, a PR perspective, how could they not put him on the exempt list already, at least while they conduct their own investigation? And because of the sheer number of women, they have to speak to as many of them as are willing to come forward and consider all of that evidence. And then they're going to have to make their determination. There's just too much media around this, and there are too many people. I don't see how they get out from under it.
We know that the NFL did launch an investigation. Lisa Friel is going to be, she's going to be spearheading that. The NFL has never put anyone who's only facing civil charges, though, on the exempt list. It's usually been criminal, but I think there could be some latitude in the bylaws there that could extend towards it. Amy Dash is our guest. Amy, just a few more for you, and we always appreciate your time and your expertise. From what we've been reading from the accuser side, from the victim side, the allegations against Watson, if they do take something and there are criminal charges, what's he looking at here if it goes that route?
It depends on how many people come forward that are believable and how many charges he's indicted on. So maybe he would be indicted on charges related to one or two people. There's a big variety of accusations here. So there are some people who say that he showed his genitals to them. So that might be like an indecent exposure, which would be a misdemeanor. You could even get probation on something like that. And it's hard to tell because that's in the context of a massage, right? So that could go either way. And he said, she said, that's a harder case to prove. But then you have people who are claiming he forced them to commit oral sex on him, that there was forcible kissing. Those types of cases are more likely for an indictment. However, I've said this before, but if you get an indictment on, let's say, one or two people, you could still apply as the prosecutor to bring in all of these other women to testify as pattern witnesses to show that this was a pattern of behavior. And that was done in the Cosby trial, and it's been done in a lot of different high-profile trials. So it really depends. But sexual assault can be a first-degree or a second-degree felony. So if it's a first degree or a second degree, actually, he could face anywhere from 2 years to 99 years. Now, obviously, 99 years is not as likely. But if you're piling on the charges, the judge also has to decide, is he going to serve, if he's convicted, the sentence back to back to back, or is he going to serve it all together? So let's say he's convicted on one charge and it's 2 to 3 years in prison. Two charges, 2 to 3 years each in prison. Is he going to serve 6 years, or is he just going to serve the 2 to 3 for both? So it really could go across the spectrum. But if he doesn't have a criminal record, I think that it's probably going to be, well, Kellen Winslow actually is a good comparison. He got 14 years and he had a whole host of allegations that he was raping homeless women, and the charges there were more severe. But
Darren Sharper too.
Darren Sharper, exactly. And then Darren Sharper, I think he was like 18 years, and he was charged in all these different jurisdictions. So you were talking, Maggie, about Atlanta and Los Angeles. And so when you're in different jurisdictions, a lot of times you have to apply to say, please let me serve this sentence concurrently with the other sentences in the other jurisdictions. And maybe you get 5 years in one jurisdiction. And like with Darren Sharper, he got a couple years in one and then 18 years in another.
Amy, last one for me would be, I asked you about, from a Hardin perspective. How about from a Busby perspective? You said if you were, part of the legal team for Deshaun Watson, you'd be looking to try and settle. Do you think Busby right now, it would be open or looking to try, because it's gone so far down the road here. There's so many women. Now, if they're investigating it legally in Houston as well, if you're Tony Busby, would you even be looking to settle right now?
Gosh, I hate to fall back on the stereotype that lawyers are just out for money, because I don't believe that's always true. But money is certainly a part of it. And so if he's asking for minimal damages in his court case, and he asked originally for a 6-figure sum, that at least at one point there was money on his mind. He's got to be paid his legal fees. If it goes the criminal route, he doesn't make any money. If it goes to court and he stays on this lectern of we only want a little bit of money because this isn't about money, he doesn't make any money. I mean, I doubt that these women, if they're massage artists, are paying him, hundreds of dollars an hour. So I think he's going to look to settle, certainly. And this is part of the strategy, to put all the public pressure and file lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Now, I'll give it to Hardin and to Deshaun Watson because they haven't caved into that yet. So the lawsuits just keep coming.
Wow. Amy Dash, legal analyst at WFAN, CBS Sports. Hey, Amy, we appreciate the time this afternoon. Sure. Thanks for your perspective. Always great chatting with you and catching up with you, and we'll do it again soon.
Great. Thank you, guys.